Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Andrea and this is a place where I talk about everything I've learned from being an e-commerce small business owner over the past 8 years. I've been selling on Etsy, I've sold on WooCommerce, and now I sell on Shopify, Etsy and Shopify. And this channel is where I share all things small business ownership, e-commerce, Etsy specific. That's what we talk about on this channel. Today specifically, we are going to be answering the question, should you sell on Etsy or Shopify? So obviously I am a person who talks about Etsy and Shopify and e-commerce online. I talk about that on the internet, on Instagram, on YouTube. And so I get questions about people who are about to start a business or are venturing into other avenues for their business. And this is a question that I get a lot. Should I sell on Etsy or should I sell on Shopify? And I have a lot of thoughts about that. And so I would just like to break that down and kind of explain my thoughts on the topic of Etsy versus Shopify. My very first thought is that Etsy and Shopify aren't really comparable. I think that this is very much an apples to oranges comparison because I personally view Etsy as a marketplace and I view Shopify more as a website host. So when I say that, I mean that Etsy is a online storefront basically. And yes, they have all the things that you need to run your e-commerce business as far as shipping label printing and combos and all of those sorts of tools. The tools are more robust on Shopify. I will be 100% honest with you about that. However, in addition to supplying those basic e-commerce needs, they also provide what I call, and I've called it this on this channel before, a built-in market. So Etsy is very, very good at bringing people to their platform, to Etsy.com. They bring in billions of sellers a year who are warm buyers and ready to purchase from small businesses like yours. So that being said, Etsy is definitely more of a marketplace. It's not like Shopify. There's not a central Shopify spot that people can go to look for like small businesses or any of that sort of stuff. So it's definitely more of a marketplace, whereas I view Shopify as more of a very robust, good, solid website host, but not a marketplace. I hope this is making sense. So in my mind, they are not comparable. And for the most part, this is not an either or question, but rather should I sell on one and the other kind of question. So now that we have covered that Shopify and Etsy really aren't all that comparable. Of course, they're both e-commerce website platforms. They are in the same realm, but they are not necessarily all that comparable. We need to talk about who can sell on what. So if you're asking yourself, should I sell on Etsy or Shopify? There are parameters to selling on Etsy, and so we need to talk about those things. Etsy is a marketplace specifically for handmade and vintage items. Handmade and vintage is, to be 100% honest, they use those terms kind of liberally. You don't necessarily have to hand make an item, but you need to have a role in the designing process at least. And so this looks like digital items that you've designed, digital things that you've designed that you've had someone else print onto a t-shirt, or items that you've literally handmade like crocheted, or items with a handmade element like my shop. We embroider t-shirts that are already made, so we add a handmade element. That is sort of the handmade aspect of Etsy. And then the vintage aspect is that they also allow vintage items to be sold on their platform. So that being said, it is not a platform for if you just want to buy and sell tennis shoes that you didn't make or have any process in designing. You have to have a handmade or vintage aspect to your item in order to sell on Etsy. So the next step in asking yourself, should I sell on Etsy or Shopify, is are you even allowed to sell on Etsy? Is your item prohibited or allowed on their platform? And if the answer is yes, then we can dive into that question further, which we are going to do. But the first thing to consider is if your item is even allowed on Etsy. And then the inverse is that Shopify is for any e-commerce. It's not, there's no I'm sure there are some parameters like you can't sell dangerous items and that sort of thing, but there's no real parameters. It doesn't have nearly the amount of niche, or they haven't curated a marketplace the way that Etsy has. So if you're watching this video and you do not have a handmade or vintage item, you can just go ahead and hit pause and start your Shopify site, because you will not be permitted to sell that on Etsy. But for the sake of this video, let's assume that you do have a handmade or vintage item and are still trying to answer that question of, should I sell on Etsy or Shopify for your business? Of course, this is the point where it gets extremely business specific. What works for your handmade business might not be what's best for my handmade business. And so I just want to talk about the main differences between Etsy and Shopify so that you can make a decision. And then I'll also just talk about what I recommend for each type of business. The very first thing that I want to note is that the biggest difference between Shopify and Etsy are the traffic you receive and then the fees associated with that traffic. I hope that makes sense. That's the easiest way I can think to break it all down. But let's talk about it. Etsy traffic. So Etsy brings in billions of buyers every year to their handmade marketplace that are looking for items that you sell. They are also very warm buyers. They are buyers who are ready to purchase. So that is a massive benefit. That's a huge marketing benefit. It is much, much easier to rank on Etsy as far as like search. It is much easier to rank on Etsy search than it is to rank on Google search. And when you are on Etsy, you're only competing, I'm not gonna say only, you are competing mostly with other Etsy sellers. You are trying to rank on Etsy, whereas when you choose to have a Shopify hosted website, you are ranking against all of Google. And so the fact that Etsy is bringing in billions and billions of buyers every year is a huge benefit to you. However, it does cost more money than Shopify in the sense that they charge a 6.5%, as of right now, that sometimes changes, a 6.5% transaction fee. On the flip side, the Shopify site is much, much harder to get traffic to, because it's not like they're bringing traffic to your shop. What traffic you bring to you are responsible for bringing the traffic to your Shopify site, if that makes sense, but their fees are much lower. They're much lower if you're getting sales, because they do have a monthly fee, whereas Etsy does not have a monthly fee, which we're going to talk about in a second. But basically, you are responsible for bringing the traffic in, but per transaction, your fees are lower on Shopify. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you have a good idea of the benefits and the differences and what Shopify is and what Etsy is. So let's talk about what I recommend. In order to do that, we are going to need to look at a few factors. The first thing that we want to look at is, where is your traffic currently coming from? Are you someone who only sells to family and friends? You don't have any traffic at all because you haven't really even started your business. You have a massive Instagram following, or you have tons of Facebook friends that are interested. Where is your traffic coming from? And the reason why this matters is because if you're someone who has a ton of traffic from Instagram, say you have this massive Instagram following or YouTube following or Facebook following, basically you have an online following on a social media platform, Shopify might be a very, very good option for you, because you will be able to drive traffic to your site yourself. And then you won't be having to pay those extra Etsy fees for traffic that you brought in. If you are someone who hasn't started your business yet, it just has a personal Instagram account, doesn't have a ton of traffic online, Etsy might be a really good option for you, because it is very good at driving traffic to your shop. Of course, you have to optimize your shop like crazy, but I think you're more likely to get traffic faster on Etsy than Shopify if you do not have a massive audience, if that makes sense. The next factor to consider is, do you have an Etsy search-friendly item? So I am going to need to explain that a little bit. I am a firm believer that on Etsy specifically, you are better off to have a little bit of competition in your niche, because that means that there is search volume around the keywords that you are trying to rank for. So what I mean by that is, if you have a super, super niche product that solves a super niche problem, you might not want to sell on Etsy because there isn't any search volume for that item there. You might be better off marketing your product on Instagram and linking out to a Shopify site. I'm hoping this makes sense. So I know that my items are very Etsy search friendly, in the sense that people come to Etsy to look for embroidered gifts, monogram gifts, personalized gifts. That's what they come to Etsy to look for. And so my item has a healthy amount of competition Maybe a lot of competition, like there's a lot of competition in my niche, but that is definitely not a deal breaker, which we talk about on this channel, but it has a healthy amount of competition and a healthy amount of search volume so that we can all stay in business. So what I mean by does your item have a good amount of, like, is your item Etsy search friendly, is are people going to Etsy to search for what you sell? That's the easiest way to break it down. And if the answer is yes, then I definitely recommend selling on Etsy at least, maybe Shopify too, depending on the first and the third factor, which we're about to talk about. But definitely you want to sell on Etsy if you have an Etsy search friendly item. The last factor to consider is how much money do you have? So I know I shouldn't say that, but it just is a factor. Definitely starting on Etsy is much, much less expensive because there's no setup cost as far as like a theme is concerned or anything like that. And there's also no monthly cost. There's just the cost. The higher cost comes from the ones that are associated when someone buys your item. And so if you are kind of strapped for cash and you just want to be able to start, I definitely recommend starting on Etsy. If you have the time and finances to allocate for starting your own Shopify site, then that could be a really good option based on the first and second factors. So those are 3 things that definitely need to be considered before you make this decision. And obviously those are highly business specific. At Saltwater Prep, we have both Etsy and Shopify, but like 90% of our revenue comes from Etsy. Our Shopify site is definitely the way far down on the list and probably needs to be updated, and maybe I should make that a project, but Etsy is what drives the revenue, so that's what I spend time on. So that is what we do at Saltwater Prep. I really hope this video was helpful if you are trying to make this decision. I hope that it helped you kind of know what to think about, analyze your business, and make the decision for your business. If you are interested in learning more about Etsy, e-commerce, small business, all those sorts of things, I would love it if you hung out and subscribed. Please go check out my masterclass. It is linked in the description below. It is all about how to start on Etsy with a 3-step framework. If you choose that Etsy is right for you, definitely make sure to check that out. And yeah, I hope that you decide to hang out with me here and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.